A hard day's work. The small diner on the corner of Maple Avenue wasn't the kind of place where famous faces strolled in. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee, where the regulars had their seats worn in, and where the hardworking staff pushed through their shifts with aching feet and hopeful hearts. For Lena Carter, this diner was both a lifeline and a cage. At 24 years old, she had already seen more hardship than most. Her mother had passed away when she was just a teenager, leaving her to care for her younger brother, Ethan. Their father had left long before, disappearing into the shadows of broken promises. Since then, life had been a constant uphill battle, one where every dollar counted, and every unpaid bill felt like a looming storm. Tonight, like every other night, Lena was working the closing shift. The diner was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers. The neon sign flickered outside, casting a tired glow on the rain-slicked streets. Her shift had been long, her tips meager, and her patience stretched thin. She had hoped for a quiet end to the night, but just as she was wiping down the counter, the doorbell jingled. A man stepped in, dressed in a simple black hoodie, worn jeans and boots. He carried himself with quiet confidence, yet there was something humble about him. Lena barely looked up. Another customer, another order, another hour of exhaustion. She grabbed her notepad and walked over. "What can I get you?" she asked, forcing a polite smile. The man looked up, and for a brief second, Lena felt her heart skip a beat. She knew that face. Keanu Reeves. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Maybe the exhaustion was getting to her. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate joke. Why would a Hollywood legend be sitting in her diner at nearly midnight? But he was real. And he was smiling at her. "A coffee, please, and whatever you recommend for a late-night meal," he said, his voice as gentle as it was familiar. Lena hesitated. Of all the people she had expected to walk through the door tonight, Keanu Reeves was at the bottom of the list. But if he wanted a meal, she'd give him the best they had. "Coming right up," she said, hurrying back to the kitchen. A customer like no other. Lena tried to keep her hands from shaking as she prepared his coffee. The kitchen smelled like fresh fries and grilled cheese sandwiches, and she decided to make him something simple, a warm, hearty meal. She stole quick glances at him as he sat at the counter. He wasn't glued to his phone. He wasn't demanding anything special. He just sat there, looking around the diner as if he belonged. Unlike other celebrities, he wasn't hiding behind an entourage or dark sunglasses. He was just himself. She brought over his meal and set it in front of him. "Here you go. Hope you like it." Keanu chuckled. "If it's made with care, I'm sure it's perfect." Lena felt a warmth in her chest. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone like him. He took a bite and nodded approvingly. "This is really good." She smiled, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. A conversation that changed everything. As the night wore on, the diner emptied, leaving only Lena and Keanu. He sipped his coffee, seemingly content to sit in silence, but something about his presence made her want to talk. "Can I ask you something?" she finally blurted out. Keanu looked up. "Of course. Why are you here? I mean, don't you have fancy places to be?" He chuckled softly. "I like places like this. I like meeting real people. And sometimes a quiet diner is the best place to think." Lena nodded slowly. She understood that more than anyone. Keanu must have noticed something in her expression because he tilted his head slightly. "You look tired. Long shift." She let out a dry laugh. Long life. For some reason, she found herself telling him everything. About Ethan. About her struggles. About how every day felt like a battle she wasn't sure she could keep fighting. Keanu listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't give her empty words of sympathy. He just let her talk. When she finally finished, there was a long pause. Then he spoke. "You're stronger than you think, Lena. She swallowed hard. No one had ever told her that before. The tip that broke her. The clock neared closing time, and Keanu finally stood up. "I should get going." Lena nodded, trying to ignore the strange sadness that settled in her chest. It was ridiculous, really. He was just another customer, a customer who happened to be Keanu Reeves. He reached for his wallet, but instead of handing her a few bills, he pulled out something else, a small, folded piece of paper. "Thank you for the meal, Lena, and for the conversation." He placed the paper on the counter along with a stack of $100 bills. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen that much money in one place. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Inside was a simple message. "Never stop believing in yourself. Better days are coming." Signed, Keanu Reeves. Tears welled in her eyes. She had spent so long feeling invisible, so long fighting to survive, that she had forgotten what kindness felt like. And in a single night, a stranger had reminded her. She looked up, but he was already gone. The rain fell softly outside. The diner was silent, but in that moment, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The echo of kindness. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle by the time Lena locked up the diner. The world outside was still, a city wrapped in the quiet hush of midnight. The neon sign flickered once, then went dark, leaving only the glow of streetlights reflecting off damp pavement. But Lena's world was anything but still. Her hands trembled as she tucked the stack of $100 bills into her apron. The weight of it felt surreal. It wasn't just money. It was a lifeline, a whisper of hope, a promise that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She clutched the note Keanu Reeves had left, reading his words again under the dull glow of the diner's EXIT sign. "Never stop believing in yourself. Better days are coming." A lump formed in her throat. She wiped her eyes quickly, inhaling deeply before stepping out into the night. An unfamiliar feeling. Lena's walk home was long and cold. Her tiny apartment was a 40-minute trek from the diner, a route that wound through the quieter parts of town. She had gotten used to it, used to the blisters on her feet, the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Tonight, though, something was different. For the first time in years, she didn't feel crushed beneath the weight of her struggles. She could hear her own footsteps echoing against the pavement, but instead of the usual dread that accompanied her walk home, she felt something new. Lightness. Hope. By the time she reached her apartment complex, a rundown building with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights, she felt almost afraid to open the door. What if this was all a dream? What if, when she walked inside, everything was still the same? She took a breath and turned the key. Home, or what was left of it. The apartment was small, barely enough for her and Ethan. Cracked tiles lined the kitchen floor, and the heater was always on the fritz. But it was home. She tiptoed inside, careful not to wake Ethan. He was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a thin blanket. The sight of him, so small, so fragile in sleep, made Lena's heart squeeze. He was only 16 but had already learned too much about sacrifice. He worked part-time at a gas station when he wasn't in school, doing his best to help, even though it wasn't his responsibility. Lena sat beside him, brushing his dark curls away from his forehead. He stirred slightly, mumbling in his sleep. She knew she had to tell them. About Keanu. About the money. About the impossible kindness that had walked into her diner tonight. But not now. Instead, she clutched the note in her hand and whispered, "Better days are coming, kiddo." For the first time in a long time, she actually believed it. What do you do with a miracle? The next morning, Lena woke up to the smell of coffee. Ethan was already up, standing in the kitchen with a pot of instant coffee and a pan of eggs. He wasn't the best cook, but he tried. "Morning, chef," she teased, stretching as she walked over. "Morning, overworked waitress," he shot back, grinning. Lena chuckled but then hesitated. The envelope of money sat on the counter. She had hidden it last night, but now In the light of day, it felt impossible to ignore. Ethan followed her gaze. "What's that?" he asked, eyebrows furrowing. Lena exhaled. "Here we go." "It's something crazy," she admitted, turning to face him. Last night, Keanu Reeves came into the diner. Ethan nearly dropped the pan. "What?" "Yeah, I know. I thought I was hallucinating, too. And you're telling me this like it's normal." He gawked. "Did he do the 'you're breathtaking' thing?" Lena snorted. "No, but he left this." She handed him the note. His eyes widened as he read it. Then she opened the envelope and let him see the money. Silence. Then, a slow, disbelieving exhale. "Lena, this is a lot." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair. "What are we gonna do with it?" Lena bit her lip. She had been asking herself the same question all night. Pay off some bills. Fix the heater. Buy real groceries for once instead of just instant noodles and canned soup. Or should they save it? She had no idea. All she knew was that this was the first time in years that they weren't completely drowning. And it was all because of one man's kindness. More than just money. The days that followed felt strange. Lena was used to struggling. Used to watching every penny. Used to avoiding calls from debt collectors. Used to wondering if they'd have enough to get through the month. But now, for the first time in forever, she could breathe. She paid off a few overdue bills. Stocked their tiny fridge with fresh food. Got Ethan a warm winter coat, something she hadn't been able to afford in years. Yet, even as life started to feel lighter, something nagged at her. Keanu hadn't just left money. He had left a message. Never stop believing in yourself. Was she really doing that? Or was she just surviving? She thought about it constantly, especially on nights when she stared up at the cracked ceiling, wondering if this was it, if this was all life would ever be. And then, one evening, an idea hit her. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving. Maybe it was time to start living. A choice that changed everything. The next week, Lena did something she hadn't done in years. She enrolled in night classes. She had always wanted to be a writer, but dreams didn't pay bills. At least, that's what she had told herself when she dropped out of college to take care of Ethan. But what if she could make it work? What if Keanu's words weren't just encouragement but a challenge? She used part of the money to cover the first few months of tuition. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And when she walked into her first class, feeling nervous and out of place, she whispered under her breath, "Better days are coming." For the first time in her life, she truly believed it. An unexpected reunion. The wind had a sharp bite that evening as Lena stepped out of her night class. The city lights shimmered in the distance, their glow barely reaching the dimly lit street where she waited for the bus. Her fingers were still numb from taking notes, and her mind swirled with excitement and exhaustion. She had done it. She had actually enrolled in college again. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. But this time, it wasn't from the cold. It was from something else. Possibility. It had been weeks since Keanu Reeves had walked into her diner and left behind a note that had changed everything. She hadn't expected the weight of those words to linger in her heart the way they did. Never stop believing in yourself. They had pushed her forward on the nights when exhaustion nearly convinced her to quit. They had kept her strong when self-doubt whispered cruel lies in her ears. And now she was doing it. But as much as she wanted to celebrate, reality hadn't magically transformed overnight. She was still balancing her job, her bills, and caring for Ethan. She still had to stretch every dollar. And most of all, she still carried the fear of failure, fear that this was all too good to last. She checked her phone. The bus was running late. With a sigh, she shoved her hands into her jacket pockets and started walking. Her path took her toward a small bookstore, the kind with old wooden shelves and the scent of well-loved pages lingering in the air. She had passed it dozens of times, but never stepped inside, until tonight. Something about the warm glow spilling from its windows pulled her in. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped through the door. A familiar face. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The store was quiet and cozy, with rows of books stacked high and the faint hum of jazz music playing in the background. An elderly woman sat behind the counter, flipping through a thick novel. Lena wandered toward the fiction section, running her fingers along the spines of books she couldn't afford to buy. Someday I'll be able to walk into a place like this and not worry about the price tags. She sighed and turned the corner, only to freeze mid-step. Sitting in one of the bookstore's reading nooks, flipping through a book with an amused smile, was Keanu Reeves. Lena's heart jumped into her throat. Of all the places in this city, why here? Why now? For a brief second, she considered turning around and walking out before he noticed her. But before she could move, he looked up and smiled. Lena. Her breath caught. He remembered her. Oh. Hi. Smooth. He closed the book and tilted his head slightly, as if piecing together why she was here. I wasn't expecting to run into you again. Neither was I. Lena swallowed hard and took a hesitant step forward. Yeah, same. Keanu chuckled, setting the book aside. How have you been? How had she been? A million thoughts rushed through her mind, but only one thing came out. You kind of changed my life. Silence stretched between them. Keanu raised an eyebrow, his expression turning serious. How so? Lena took a deep breath. And then she told him everything. About how she had been drowning before that night at the diner. About how his words had stayed with her, pushing her to finally enroll in school. About how she still worked at the diner, still struggled, but now she had hope. By the time she finished, Keanu's expression had softened. His gaze held something deep, something more than just kindness. Pride. That's incredible, Lena. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. I'm really proud of you. She felt her throat tighten. No one had ever said that to her before. An offer she couldn't refuse. They talked for a while after that. Keanu asked her about school, about what she wanted to write. And for the first time in a long time, Lena let herself dream out loud. She told him about her love for storytelling, about how words had always been her escape, about how, if she could, she would write books that made people feel the way she had felt when she read her first novel. Keanu listened intently, nodding in encouragement. Then, after a pause, he said something that made her world stop. What if I could help? Lena blinked. Help. Keanu leaned forward slightly. I know people in the industry. Editors. Publishers. If you're serious about writing, I'd love to introduce you to some of them. Lena stared at him, her mind refusing to process what she had just heard. Keanu Reeves was offering to help her with her writing career. This had to be a dream. She shook her head quickly. Oh no. I mean that's. She laughed nervously. I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not asking, Keanu said simply. I'm offering. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had spent her entire life believing that success was something people like her didn't get. That people who struggled as hard as she did didn't get lucky breaks. But now, she had a choice. She could let fear win. She could tell herself she wasn't good enough, that she didn't deserve this. Or she could take a leap of faith. She could believe in herself. Lena took a shaky breath. Okay. Keanu's smile widened. Good. He pulled out a small notebook and scribbled something down. Here's my assistant's number. Call her tomorrow, and we'll set something up. Lena took the paper with trembling fingers. She had no idea what the future held. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to find out. Walking into the unknown. Lena had never felt this kind of nervousness before, not when she walked into her first night class, not even when she struggled to pay rent on time. This was something different. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small piece of paper in her hand, the one Keanu Reeves had given her the night before. A phone number. A direct line to his assistant. She had spent the entire night tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling of their tiny apartment, asking herself one question over and over again. Could this really be happening? Ethan had already left for school, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The apartment felt eerily silent, as if the whole world was waiting for her to make a decision. Lena exhaled sharply. This was it. This was the moment. If she called, her life could change forever. If she didn't, she shook the thought away and grabbed her phone. Before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed the number. The line rang once, twice. Then, "Hello, this is Maria." The voice on the other end was warm, professional. Lena swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Hi, my name is Lena Carter. Keanu Reeves told me to call." A brief pause. Then, "Oh, yes, Lena. He told me about you." Lena's breath caught. "He actually talked about me. Mr. Reeves is very interested in helping you. He mentioned you're a writer." I want to be." "That's a great start," Maria said kindly. "He's arranged for you to meet someone, an editor from a publishing house. They'd love to look at your work." Lena gripped the phone tighter. An editor, a real one. Someone who worked in publishing. This was too much. This was insane. "Are you available this Friday afternoon?" Lena's mind scrambled for an answer. Friday. That was just 2 days away. She had work, a shift at the diner. But could she really pass this up? No. She knew the answer before the thought even finished forming. "Yes," she said quickly. "I'll be there." A leap of faith. Lena had never been inside a real office building before, let alone one in the heart of the city, where the buildings towered like giants over the streets below. Everything about it screamed wealth, success, and importance, 3 things she had never known. She stood outside, clutching her small notebook to her chest, feeling completely out of place. What am I doing here? What if they took one look at her writing and laughed? What if this was all a huge mistake? Lena closed her eyes. "You belong here," she whispered to herself. "You belong here." With one last deep breath, she pushed through the heavy glass doors. Meeting the gatekeeper. The waiting area was sleek and modern, filled with leather chairs and artwork she didn't understand. A receptionist smiled at her. "Lena Carter." She nodded. "Yes. Right this way." She was led down a hallway lined with framed book covers. Real books, published books, the kind people actually read. And now, someone inside this building was going to read her work. She was led into an office, where a tall woman with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair stood waiting. "You must be Lena." Lena nodded, forcing herself to speak. "Yes. Thank you for meeting with me." The woman motioned for her to sit. "Keanu told me a bit about you." Hearing his name still felt surreal. "He said you're a storyteller, that you have something special." Lena swallowed. No pressure. "I'd love to see your work." Her fingers shook slightly as she pulled her notebook from her bag and placed it on the desk. The woman picked it up, flipping through the pages. Silence stretched. Lena felt like she couldn't breathe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman looked up. "You have raw talent, Lena." Lena's heart skipped. Raw talent. Was that a good thing? A bad thing? "You're rough around the edges, but you have something real. Your writing has heart." Lena exhaled sharply, her pulse thundering. This wasn't a rejection. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. "I want to work with you," the woman said finally. "We can polish this, shape it into something that can sell." Lena's hands trembled. She wasn't dreaming. This was real. The first step. When Lena walked out of that building, she wasn't the same person who had walked in. She wasn't just a struggling waitress anymore. She was a writer. An aspiring one. A hopeful one. But a writer nonetheless. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was moving forward. All because one man had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. When dreams collide with reality, The wind outside was brutal as Lena walked home, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The city's golden lights sparkled in the distance, but she barely noticed them. Her mind was a swirling storm. She had done it. She had actually sat in an office with a real editor, heard words she never thought she'd hear. You have talent. But as much as she wanted to bask in that moment, doubt clung to her like a shadow. There was no guarantee this would work. No guarantee she wouldn't mess it all up. And then there was the biggest problem of all. Money. Working on a book meant time. Time she didn't have. She needed every hour at the diner just to keep their heads above water. She sighed, her fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. Could she really balance both? Could she afford to chase a dream? The thoughts haunted her as she turned the key to her apartment. But when she stepped inside, the sight that greeted her made everything else fade. Ethan was sitting at the table, waiting for her, and he was beaming. A brother's faith. "Okay," Ethan said as she set her bag down. "Spill. How'd it go?" Lena took a breath, shaking off the weight of her worries. It was incredible. Ethan's grin widened. "See, I told you. You're amazing, and people are finally realizing it." She laughed softly, sitting down across from him. "They didn't exactly hand me a book deal, but they said they'd work with me." Ethan's eyes shone with pride. "That's huge, Lena. This is happening." Lena wanted to believe it, but she hesitated. "There's just one problem. Writing takes time. I already barely have enough hours in the day." Ethan's expression sobered. "You're worried about money." She nodded. He was silent for a moment. Then he leaned forward. "Lena, you've spent years sacrificing everything for me, taking care of me, working yourself to exhaustion. You always told me we had to keep fighting, that we couldn't give up." His voice softened. "Maybe it's time you took your own advice." Lena felt her throat tighten. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I can get more hours at the gas station. I can help more around here. You gave up so much for me. Let me do the same for you." Lena's chest ached. "Ethan, you've spent your whole life surviving," he interrupted gently. "Maybe it's time you start living." A lump formed in her throat. She had been Ethan's protector since he was little. She had fought so hard to shield him from the harshness of their world. But now he was standing beside her, ready to help her fight for her dreams. And for the first time, she let him. A job that no longer fits. The next day, Lena walked into the diner with a different kind of energy. It had been her safe place for years, a place that kept her and Ethan afloat when there was nothing else. But now it felt like a cage. As she tied her apron, she felt a deep ache in her chest, because she knew something she had never admitted before. This wasn't where she was meant to be. She had loved her coworkers. She had found moments of comfort here. But deep down, she had never wanted to spend her life refilling coffee cups and serving fries. For the first time, she saw it for what it was. A stepping stone, not a home. She was wiping down a table when her boss, Frank, approached. He was an older man, rough around the edges, but with a good heart. "You're glowing today," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Win the lottery or something." Lena chuckled. Not quite. But something pretty amazing happened. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. It was time. "I got an opportunity. A real one. A chance to become a writer." Frank blinked. She swallowed hard. "I'm not quitting. Not yet. But I might need fewer hours soon." Frank studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You know what? I always knew you were meant for bigger things, kid." Lena's eyes widened. "You did." He smirked. "Of course. No offense, but you've never had that diner lifer energy. You've got dreams in your bones." Something inside her cracked open. Dreams in her bones. Had that been true all along? Had she just never let herself believe it? Frank clapped her on the shoulder. "Tell you what, If you ever decide to go all in with this writing thing, don't worry about giving 2 weeks' notice. Just go chase it." Lena's chest tightened with gratitude. Maybe leaving this place one day wouldn't be as terrifying as she thought. When fate intervenes, the next few weeks blurred together. Work, classes, writing. Repeat. Lena barely slept, but for once, exhaustion didn't feel like a burden. It felt like progress. She wrote late into the nights, filling page after page. Her editor sent back notes, critiques, challenges. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done before. But she loved it. She felt alive. Then, one evening, as she sat at her usual table in the bookstore, her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, until she saw the name. Keanu Reeves. Her heart skipped a beat. She answered, voice shaky. Hello." His familiar, warm chuckle came through the line. "Lena, how's my favorite writer doing?" She nearly choked. "Favorite writer? I'm okay," she blurted out. "How are you?" "Better now that I know you're still fighting for your dream," he said smoothly. She couldn't help but smile. "Listen, I have something I wanted to ask you," Keanu continued. "I know you're still in the early stages of your book, but how do you feel about coming to an event with me?" Lena blinked. Event? A fundraiser, a literary gala, actually. Some of the biggest names in publishing will be there. Her stomach flipped. "I want you to come as my guest," Keanu said. "Meet some people, maybe get your foot in the door." Lena's breath caught. This was huge. But could she do it? Could she walk into a world so different from her own and believe she belonged? She gripped the phone tighter. She thought about Ethan's words, about Frank's encouragement, about Keanu's belief in her from the very beginning. And then she made her decision. I'd love to go. A world she never knew. The moment Lena stepped out of the cab, she felt like she had entered an entirely different universe. The grand hotel in front of her was something straight out of a movie. Marble columns stretched into the sky. Chandeliers glittered behind the glass windows, and the sound of expensive laughter floated in the crisp night air. She swallowed hard, tightening her grip on her small clutch. What was she doing here? She wasn't like these people. She had spent the last 5 years wearing diner uniforms, scrubbing tables, and counting every dollar in her bank account. The thought of walking into a literary gala filled with some of the biggest names in publishing was terrifying. She turned slightly, thinking maybe she should just. Lena. Her breath hitched at the familiar voice. She turned to find Keanu Reeves standing near the entrance, watching her with an easy smile. For a man who had made a career out of playing action heroes, he looked effortlessly calm in a classic black suit, his long hair pushed back, his hands tucked into his pockets. "Keanu," she exhaled, half in relief, half in disbelief. He stepped closer, his smile widening slightly as he took in her nervous expression. "You look great." Lena glanced down at her dress, a simple but elegant navy blue gown she had found at a thrift store after hours of searching. It wasn't designer, but it made her feel different, almost like she belonged. "Thanks," she mumbled. "You don't look too bad yourself." Keanu chuckled. "You ready?" Was she? Absolutely not. But she nodded anyway. He held out his arm, and after a brief hesitation, she looped hers through his, and together they stepped inside. The Gala of Giants. The moment they entered, the sheer grandeur of the event nearly knocked the breath out of her. The ballroom was massive. Golden chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Long tables were lined with gourmet dishes she couldn't even name. And the guests. They were the kind of people Lena had only ever seen on the backs of book covers. She recognized literary agents, best-selling authors, and powerful editors from publishing houses she had only dreamed of working with. And every single one of them looked like they belonged. Lena? She felt like an imposter. She kept her arm looped around Keanu's as they walked deeper into the crowd, her fingers trembling slightly. She was starting to think this was a bad idea, a terrible idea, when suddenly, Keanu leaned down and whispered, "Breathe, Lena." She forced herself to inhale. "Relax," he continued, his tone light. "You don't have to impress anyone. You're already here. That means something." She let his words settle in. "I'm already here." She nodded, exhaling slowly. And then, just as she was starting to calm down, Keanu led her straight into a conversation with one of the most powerful publishers in the industry. A seat at the table. Lena wasn't sure how it happened. One minute, she was standing beside Keanu, listening politely as he introduced her to a group of executives. The next, she was sitting at a private table, a glass of champagne in front of her, and the CEO of a major publishing house was asking her about her book. Her book. Not Keanu. Not his career. Her. Lena cleared her throat. Well, it's a contemporary fiction piece. It's about a girl who's struggling to find her place in the world while taking care of her younger brother. The woman, Eleanor Grant, one of the biggest names in publishing, nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like it comes from personal experience, Eleanor mused. Lena hesitated. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Eleanor took a sip of her drink. So, why now? Why are you pursuing writing at this point in your life? Lena blinked. For a second, she felt exposed. No one had ever asked her that before. But then, she thought of Ethan. She thought of long nights scrubbing tables, the exhaustion, the sacrifices. She thought of Keanu walking into her diner and reminding her that she was capable of more. So, instead of hiding, she told the truth. "I never thought I'd get the chance," she admitted softly. "I spent years surviving. I told myself that dreaming was a luxury I couldn't afford. But then, someone reminded me that I have a story to tell." Eleanor studied her. For a moment, Lena was sure she was going to laugh or dismiss her. Instead, the woman smiled. "I'd like to read it," she said simply. Lena's heart stopped. "You would?" Eleanor nodded. "Send me your first 3 chapters. Let's see what you've got." A moment of doubt. Lena should have been ecstatic. She had just gotten an invitation from one of the most powerful publishers in the industry to submit her work. But as she stepped away from the table, her chest felt tight. What if her chapters weren't good enough? What if this was all a mistake? Keanu found her standing near one of the balcony doors, her hands gripping the railing as she took deep breaths. "Hey," he said, stepping beside her. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "I think I just forgot how to breathe for a second." Keanu chuckled. "I get that." She turned to him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Keanu, what if I mess this up?" His expression softened. "Lena," he said gently, "you already did the hardest part. You believed in yourself enough to show up." She swallowed hard. "But what if?" "No what ifs," Keanu interrupted. "You're here because you belong here. Because your story matters, and no matter what happens next, you're not alone in this." Lena's breath hitched. For so long, she had carried her dreams alone, had convinced herself that she had to do everything by herself. But maybe she didn't. Maybe, for the first time, she had people who believed in her too. She met Keanu's gaze and nodded. "I'll send the chapters," she said. His smile was full of pride. Good. A new beginning. By the time the gala ended, Lena felt different. For years, she had thought of herself as just another struggling waitress, just another person fighting to survive. But tonight, she had walked into a room full of successful, powerful people, and she hadn't backed down. She had sat at their table. She had spoken about her dream. And now, for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting for something bigger. As she climbed into the cab, she pulled out her phone and sent a text to Ethan. "Lena, I think something amazing is about to happen. Ethan, I always knew it would." She smiled. And then, with a deep breath, she started writing. Because this wasn't just a dream anymore. This was her reality. The final test. Lena had never felt this kind of nervous excitement before. She sat at the tiny wooden desk in her apartment, staring at the screen of her old laptop. The 3 chapters she had rewritten and polished over the last 2 weeks were finally ready. They sat in an email draft, waiting for her to press send. This was it, the moment she had been working toward. She had poured her heart into every word, every sentence. And now she just had to let go. Her finger hovered over the mousepad, but doubt whispered in the back of her mind. What if they don't like it? What if they laugh at me? What if they say I'm not good enough? She squeezed her eyes shut. She had come too far to let fear stop her now. With a deep breath, she hit send. The email vanished into the abyss of cyberspace. And just like that, it was out of her hands. Lena exhaled sharply, leaning back in her chair. Now, all she could do was wait. The longest week of her life. Waiting for a reply was torture. Days passed with no response. Lena went to work, attended her night classes, and continued writing. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped. Would this be the moment? Would it be a rejection? Would it be worse? No reply at all. Even Ethan noticed how anxious she was. "You're wearing a hole in the floor," he joked one evening, watching as she paced back and forth across their tiny living room. "I can't help it," Lena groaned. "What if they hate it?" Ethan rolled his eyes. "What if they love it?" She stopped pacing. "Why is that harder to believe?" she muttered. Ethan sighed and walked over, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Lena, you're doing something huge. But you have to stop thinking like you're still stuck in the past. You're not just a struggling waitress anymore." She bit her lip. Was that true? Could she really step into a new life? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Her breath hitched. Ethan looked at the screen and gasped. "It's them." Lena's hands shook as she grabbed the phone. She opened the email, and her eyes scanned the words. Then she froze. The answer that changed everything. "Dear Lena, thank you for sending us your work. We were deeply moved by your writing. Your voice is authentic, raw, and full of heart. We would love to schedule a meeting to discuss the next steps. Let us know when you're available. Best, Eleanor Grant." Lena screamed. Ethan jumped. What? What HAPPNED? She thrust the phone into his hands. He read the email, then let out a whoop so loud their upstairs neighbor banged on the floor. "Lena, this is it." Lena collapsed onto the couch, her whole body trembling. This wasn't a rejection. This wasn't just a polite brush-off. This was real. They wanted to talk about next steps. That meant publishing. That meant a real shot. Her dream was finally within reach. And then, just as she was about to celebrate, something went wrong. A storm from the past. The next morning, Lena was riding the high of her email when she got an unexpected call from work. Frank, her boss at the diner, sounded worried. "Lena, we need to talk." She frowned. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated. "Can you come in?" She hurried over, her stomach twisting. When she arrived, Frank was waiting for her, arms crossed. "Lena, someone's been asking questions about you." She blinked. "What?" Frank sighed. "A reporter." Her heart dropped. "A reporter," she repeated. Frank nodded. "They came in asking about you, about your background. Said they were writing a piece." Lena's blood turned cold. Why would a reporter care about her? Unless someone had figured out her story. The struggling waitress. The girl who had clawed her way up from nothing. And now someone wanted to expose it. Lena felt sick. Would this ruin everything? Would the publishing house still want her if they found out where she came from? Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. And before she could stop herself, she called Keanu, a friend in the firestorm. Keanu answered on the first ring. "Lena." His voice was calm but alert. "What's wrong?" She took a shaky breath. I think someone's digging into my past, she admitted. A reporter came to the diner asking about me. Keanu was silent for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. Okay, we'll handle it. We? She frowned. Keanu. Lena. He said gently, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Your story isn't something to hide. It's something to be proud of. Her throat tightened. But what if the publisher sees me as what? He interrupted. As someone who worked hard. As someone who never gave up. She bit her lip. I don't want people thinking I'm some kind of charity case. Keanu sighed. You're not, he said firmly. You're a damn good writer, Lena. That's why they're interested. Not because of your past. She closed her eyes. Could she believe that? Could she trust that she deserved this? Keanu's voice softened. You don't have to do this alone. Lena exhaled. Maybe he was right. Maybe this wasn't something to fear. Maybe this was her final test. She had spent her whole life fighting for her dream. And now she had to stand tall and claim it, a future written in ink. The next morning, Lena walked into the publisher's office with her head held high. She met with Eleanor, shaking hands firmly. And when Eleanor asked her about her past, about the diner, about her struggles, Lena told the truth. Because Keanu was right. Her past wasn't a weakness. It was her strength. Eleanor smiled. That's exactly why your story matters. Tears stung Lena's eyes. And in that moment, she knew. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The contract was signed a week later. Lena Carter, former waitress, former struggling dreamer, was now a signed author. As she stepped out into the city streets, her phone buzzed. Keanu. Told you so. She laughed, shaking her head. Her journey wasn't over. But for the first time in her life, she knew she had won. Because she never stopped believing. And neither did the people who loved her.